Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Marcus Dimbleby, and we're here to talk about dare to challenge and dare to think differently. I've got quite a checkered background. I had 20 plus years in the military, in the Royal Air Force, lots of time spent overseas with different forces, learning lots of different ways of working. And then went into consultancy, worked in, again, a different set of workplaces there, government, financial services, and then eventually ended up in the world of red teaming, which we'll be talking about today. And I'm currently the vice president at Red Team Thinking. I want to start off with something, though, the scale of the challenge. A great quote here. It's moving too fast. It is revolution, not evolution. And there are many accelerations at once. And one of the biggest problems is the difficulty of mankind to cope with it. I don't know whether political leaders or business leaders can easily handle it. And this wasn't too recent. This was back in 2018 by Ian Conn, CEO of Centrica British Gas Utilities. And he had a good year. They were up $500 million in profit, but he made this statement because he was concerned, and rightly so. A year later, his own predictions saw them lose $1 billion. And 6 months later, Ian Conn stood down as the CEO. But his predictions were true. And then 2020 arrived and changed everything. VUCA is now the new normal. Now, VUCA has been around since the 1980s. It came out of the US Army War College. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is now the latest buzzword. But it's no longer a buzzword. We've entered into an era of unprecedented VUCA. We've not seen anything like this before. New threats and new opportunities are emerging every day, and it's key to remember those opportunities because we often miss them when we're sidelined by focusing on the threats that we see. And these are now the new norms. This is the new normal going forward, and it's not just in the economic world. Business, global, political, and personal. Everybody, everywhere has been affected by this. The question is, though, are you ready to deal with it? So the Business Agility Institute put out this great report every year, and in 2019, they came up with the top 10 challenges to enabling business agility in your organization. And the top one that came up was leadership style. And in 2018, the year before, having done my research, I also found that leadership was also the #1 challenge. Now, back in March last year, when this report was due out, I bet a night on the beer in London with my friends to say, guess what the #1 reason is going to be again? And funny old thing, it was leadership style. So for 3 years running now, leadership has been the concern and the #1 challenge to enabling business agility. Not the tools, not the techniques, not the funding, not the mindset, but leadership. Why is that? Because the leadership mindset, it's still institutionalized in this command and control culture that we've been aware of for the last 20, 30 years and beyond. Executives want to change, but it's hard to change those old habits. And that's why you have to go through a process of unlearn, which Barry O'Reilly talks about, to get out of that mindset and shift into this new way of working. They're very much stuck in a command and control, or as some clients tell me, command and comply. They've got these old school behaviors. They have an inability to release the reins and delegate down to that next level because there's fear. There's fear of people not doing what they want it to be done in the way they want it to be done. There's fear of what happens if they screw up. And there's this lack of trust of enabling someone else to do it as good as they think they can do it. And it's a shame because the psychology of trust, when you look into it, we employ great people, but then we don't let them do what we employ them to do. And Jobs got this really right with Apple. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people than tell them what to do. You hire smart people so they tell us what to do. Steve Jobs wasn't the genius he appears to be. He surrounded himself with awesome people and let them guide him and tell him what to do, which is why Apple is sustaining at the level it was when he was in control. And I'm not making this up. The data doesn't lie. These are just a few snippets from the reports that have come out. 20th century bureaucracy. We're still living in the last century. Major challenges for leadership. Takes place in terms of years instead of weeks. Agile transformations aren't quick. Risk-averse cultures, silos, passivity, a lack of strongly supporting leadership. And the people at the coalface are feeling this. But don't worry, there's lots of new ways of working out there. These are the things that the leadership are now jumping on. They're being sold to by the consultants, and they believe these to be the answer to all their problems. And here we go. Here's just a sample. And this was done in 2016. 5 years on, Lord knows where we are now. But this is the myriad of new ways of working facing these individuals who are struggling with fixing the problems they're facing today. It's hardly surprising they're confused and hardly surprising these things aren't working because new ways of working don't work. The evolution from the 20th to the 21st century has brought these new techniques in. We've seen mass adoption at the coalface where they were supposed to be developed for, working well in Scrum and Agile teams, delivering quickly, understanding the problems, and then when we try to scale them and adopt to enterprise, things go horribly wrong. Over 75% plus, numerous statistics, but all over 70% show that these transformations are failing. In the US, the financial services industry spent $36 billion and can't show an ounce of performance, profit, benefit, ROI because of it. So it's a real dire state to be in, given the promise that these things brought. So why do businesses fail? There's a list here and there's many more. But if you look through that, the one commonality amongst all of those points is it's all internal. There's no external excuses for competition or the environment or even COVID. All of these things are caused by internal behaviors, and that needs to change. But the problem is there's no silver bullet. Whatever you're sold to by your consultancy, it's not going to work. And certainly a cookie cutter off the shelf model will not work for your organization. You are unique. You require bespoke tailoring for what's relevant to you and your people. Put simply, and this is my favorite quote that I've been using a lot, 21st century ways of working do not work with 20th century ways of thinking. The ways of working themselves aren't bad, but it's the adoption and the mindset that they're used to be implemented at the coalface and across enterprise that's causing the problems and frustrations. So we need a new way of thinking. And as Einstein said here, we need to start questioning everything rather than taking it as gospel. Because Adam Smith, the Scottish philosopher, was wrong. Now, for 3 centuries, he had us believe that we were rational decision makers. Unless we were swayed by strong emotion, love, passion, or lacked information, we were fundamentally making decisions with rational concepts and thought. But he was wrong. Daniel Kahneman came along, author of Thinking Fast and Slow, and he said this: our brain is a machine for jumping to conclusions. It's how we're wired. And he came up with System 1 thinking and System 2 thinking. And these are the thinking types that affect how we make decisions. Now, System 1 on the left here, it's fast, automatic, associative, unconscious, and error-prone. But we do this 95% of the time. System 2, rational thinking, slow, effortful, logical, all the words executives don't want to hear, but it's reliable. System 1's great when you're crossing the road or when you're trying to dodge tigers out on the plain centuries ago. But if we use System 1 all the time, we're going to miss things and we're going to be jumping forward. And in the VUCA world, where we have complexity, we can't afford to be rushing in with decisions. We have to probe, sense, respond, and take our time. And we're not doing that. Add to that all the biases and heuristics that we are affected by, then we have a real complicated situation in our brains going on, often evolving into complexity and chaos. And if you don't think you're affected by biases, that means you don't have a brain between your ears. Because if you have a brain, and we all do, you are affected by biases. And sometimes it's unconscious and you're not even aware you are. But there are many more than the ones on here, and they all affect how we think, how we believe, how we behave. And that has a massive impact on how we make decisions. Add to all that, our executives seem to have an obsession with speed, velocity, efficiency, output. How fast are we making stuff? And that's fine. But as 𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒔 says here, fast is fine, but accuracy is everything. In a gunfight, and I love this phrase, you need to take your time, but in a hurry. One of my favorite phrases is we need to slow down to speed up. And there's that awful feeling that we can't slow down because we seem to be not doing what we should be doing. But if we take the time, if we slow down, we're going to be far more accurate and effective rather than efficient in our delivery. And that's key. And also, we don't have another buzzword called psychological safety, which came out from Amy Edmondson here, professor from Harvard back in '99. So again, not a new term. But psychological safety is a buzzword banding around the boardrooms that all our people are safe to speak up, and diversity, inclusion, bring yourself to work, speak up, feel included. It's absolute BS. It's not happening. And the CEO believes they are. And then when you go and talk to the coalface, people are afraid to speak up. Low levels of that create a culture of silence. And what we have here is this Cassandra culture. Whereas if you do speak up, you get belittled or the warnings go unheeded. And if you listen to a great podcast recently by Daniel Kahneman, he says to be effective, you have to protect your dissenters, your mavericks, because they're the people that care. They're not the cynics. They're not doing it to disturb or to dissent. They're doing it because they care, they have the ideas, and they're passionately trying to raise their concerns because they believe there's a better way of doing things, but they're not being heard. And the reality of the end game is this. Most businesses, as I said earlier, die from self-inflicted wounds. A few big hitters on the right here, but there are many more examples to the modern day of how organizations shoot themselves in the head. And that needs to stop. Great quote here. One thing a person cannot do, no matter how rigorous his analysis or heroic his imagination, is to draw up a list of things that would never occur to him. And there's a great proverb saying, none of us is smarter than all of us. Two heads are better than one. I could go on. But it's bringing people together, sourcing the wisdom of the crowd and getting the answers from multiple sources rather than asking some consultancy to pay and give you the answers you think you need. Source the wisdom of the crowd from your people. The answers lie within. So hopefully that convinces you we need a new way of thinking. So how do we do this? Or maybe we need an old way of thinking. This chap here has got a bigger nose than me, which is why I like him. He's Pope Sixtus V, the coolest name of a pope ever. He was around in 1587. He was the pope at the time. And in the Vatican, there were people queuing up outside to become saints. Why? Because he got money for it. And he opened the office of the Advocatus Diaboli, which was a devil's advocate. And in doing so, you had to challenge those wanting sainthood. And he created a form that they had to fill out and contemplate their good deeds they were doing and have them validated. And within 12 months, they saw a 90% drop in people asking. So this was the first sign of challenge that we'd seen done formally. Moving forward, the Prussians, who were getting beaten by Napoleon, a short French corporal, how embarrassing is that? So they established Kriegspiel, wargaming, where they brought the best of their capabilities together. It wasn't all the generals around a table. They brought their sergeant, who was the best infantryman, their corporal, who was the best cavalryman, and they got them around the table to understand how they can understand the operating mindset of the enemy, the red team. And this is where the first naming of red team came from, because the Prussians wore blue and the enemy, the French, were wearing red. So what is the red team going to do today if we go onto the battlefield? Think like the enemy, assess all their threats, and as I mentioned earlier, seek opportunity. It's the opportunities that allow you to win, and they're often unsighted. Validate all your assumptions, because most of our assumptions in today's business world is just simply wishful thinking. An assumption is something you expect to become a fact, and therefore it has to be validated. And ask what if? What if they do that? What if we do this? What if the weather changes? What if things happen? Because they do, and in the VUCA world, it's constant. Moving forward, the Israelis became famous for their red team, following the Yom Kippur War, where they were almost pushed back into the sea by an unexpected attack. Well, it wasn't really. They had numerous warnings. They just ignored them through arrogance. They established 𝒃𝒊𝒅𝒂, which is he who thinks wins. He who thinks wins. Great statement. And you may have seen the movie World War Z, where you might have heard of the 10th man, of how Israel defeated the zombies. They have that same concept to this day, and it's their red teaming devil's advocate group within the Israeli Defense Intelligence Force that provides that capability. Still in strength today. And obviously post 9/11, the day after, the CIA formed the Red Cell. And in doing that, militaries across the world did the same, and businesses are now doing likewise. And from that, the DoD, the Department of Defense, created this statement of what red teaming is. And the key aspect here is it's a capability that is built for deliberate challenge. Going back to what Kahneman said, dissent. We are allowing and requesting, in fact, demanding dissent, challenge of our plans. And this is what defines the difference between this and other management tools. Leading from this, my business partner, Bryce Hoffman, on the left here, he previously wrote American Icon at Ford, but then got into understanding how Ford will fail again, and it has. So he heard about red teaming, got himself onto the military college in the US and went through the course, then wrote this book to take it out across business, to help businesses understand how these tools and techniques can help. Multiple types of red teaming. You're probably aware of some of these and not others. Threat emulation, wargaming, which we talked about, red versus blue. Physical security. How do we penetrate the physical perimeter of an airport or a public house? How do we have our networks protected? Cyber security, pen testing, penetration testing. They're the more common ones, but the one that we focus on at Red Team Thinking is decision support red teaming. It's how do you apply all those concepts to the decisions you're making, the plans and strategies you're creating, so they're going to stand contact against the enemy. Great statement is that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. How do you make sure that you've got the capability to pivot, should that happen. And there's two things we focus on, is applied critical thinking, which talks about Kahneman's System 1, System 2, and groupthink mitigation, a real toxic capability within your organizations that needs to be dissipated. So what is red team thinking? It's not a method, it's a philosophy and a toolkit. It's complementary. This isn't a new thing to replace Agile or whatever tools you're using. It's a complementary capability that you bolt onto these things to make them work better. As I said, they're not working. It's an old, new way of thinking. It's a reinvention, an evolution of an old way that's been around for centuries. And it's the adaptive application of that System 2 we talked about from Kahneman, applied critical thinking, groupthink mitigation. And how is this different from having that red team, that fixed team that challenges? If you have a red team, you have a capability within an organization, usually quite way up, and they sit there validating policies, validating plans. They're the red team. Over time, that can become quite toxic. Executives can use it to red police things, to close things down, and then people see them as a red audit. Not good. So what our concept is that instead of having a red team, why not have everybody thinking like a red teamer? And that way you have the capability across the organizations. So if you have a great leader at the top who leaves and everything collapses behind them, that doesn't happen now because you've created stickiness. You've created this capability for individuals to think, to challenge, to have safety, to do so, but also then to permeate that across the organization so everybody gets to benefit from this capability. And our philosophy is simple as this, that most of us would rather seek refuge in comforting lies than confront the hard truths they conceal. And this is a fact. This is what our brains do. We all love a bit of juicy gossip. We all live the water cooler chat. This has been proven. The cartoon here is a reality. There's a cinema in the US put on 2 movies, one about comforting lies and one with a dull, pleasant truth. The pleasant truth sold 6 tickets. The comforting lies movie sold out. It's the way our brain works and the way we're enticed. But by doing so, we believe it's these lies that hold us back, both as an individual and an organization. And if you can confront those comforting lies, get over them and surface them and do things about it, you're going to move a lot quicker, faster forward. And as General Patton here said, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. This is groupthink. This is yes men. This is conformity. People speak, everyone nods their head and goes, yes, we like that. Where we don't. We don't want to like it. We don't like it at all. We want to challenge, but we can't because we don't have psychological safety and we're just towing the line. It's a toxic culture that can quickly be created and cause you problems in your business. So in organizational dysfunction that we see groupthink, we see satisficing. That's the first answer that comes up, we go with it. Had we probed 10 further seconds or 10 minutes or 10 days, we could have found a much better solution. The Abilene paradox. Abilene's an awful place in Texas where somebody ended up one day after mentioning, where should we go? And it's that same bandwagon effect. Bob mentions one thing, everybody jumps on it because it's groupthink. And before you know it, you're doing something that you shouldn't do or don't agree with and wonder why. And obviously we see a lot of internal politics and careerism, performance management systems, bonuses, people understanding where they are on the bell curve and therefore towing the line when you need people challenging. So we believe the solution is this capability of red team thinking, enabling psychological safety that we talked about as paramount. And to do that, you can then engage your people, uplift the skills and capabilities of individuals, source that wisdom that we said is out there. All the answers lie within your organization. And in giving everyone a voice, it allows people to stand up, step up, and challenge the status quo. Status quo is not a good thing in a VUCA world. It will put you out of business. And this is really true diversity and inclusion, right? It's not some gender agenda that you might have or tick box quotas. This is true capability of enabling diversity of thought and inclusion of everybody to have a voice and to feel welcome and comfortable in the workplace. And ultimately, it's going to allow you to make better decisions faster. So what is it that needs to shift? People talk about shifting culture. You can't shift culture. It's not a thing you grip and roll. So you change the behaviors, which you can do instantly, overnight. That in time shifts people's mindset, which in turn shifts culture. And it's a virtuous circle and continues. And as we've said, this becomes a decision-making practice. It's not a process. It's not a tick box exercise. It's something that you do every day, and everything that you do it becomes muscle memory. It's not a replacement, but it complements, as I said, all those different toolkits that are out there today and makes them be more effective in their application through both business and military, to what you can see on this list here. How do we do it? Lots of different ways. We can do training. We can come in and do facilitation and support people driving this capability through. We can give one-on-one coaching at the executive level and cross-organizational presentations. And the organizations that do best with this is where they put all 4 pieces together and enable that across their organization. And this shows you how you scale this. I call it the red thread. You don't have to have the same level of intensity at all levels in the organization. We can give a 20-minute presentation to the board so they get it, and then you can cascade that capability down in different levels. And even then, we're not talking massive amounts of time. 1- and 2-day workshops, 3-hour sessions allow this capability to start to permeate very quickly and very effectively. And there's no red team here, but when you need a red team, you can pull one together and create a formal red team. And by doing so, you get the diversity of thought from across the organization and people feel included. Far more effective than having a single fixed red team at the executive level. And the toolkit I mentioned, a few of the tools here, analytical tools, contrarian tools, and imaginative tools, all supported by liberating structures that allow people, sometimes anonymously, where required, to have a voice and to use the wisdom of the crowd. All brought together, again, not methods, not tools that you use one at a time, tools that you blend together and apply at certain situations and solutions that you're trying to achieve and problems you're facing to get the best outcome. Bespoke, tailored for what you need when you need it. So I go back to the initial statement. This stands. People need to accept this. There are no super CEOs anymore. There are no super ministers. There are no superheroes. This has to be a team effort. And the way you enable the team isn't through ways of working. It's through that and ways of thinking. So you get the best of everybody below your organization. Because as I said up front, 21st century ways of working don't work with 20th century ways of thinking. So hopefully we can evolve the ways of thinking, slow down to speed up, and achieve together what we need to do going forward. Because if you're stuck in the middle of this right now, if you don't think you need help, you probably do, and your teams certainly will, and they'll be crying out for it. You're just not listening or hearing them because of the situation and the system that's in place preventing that. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of why we need to dare to challenge and dare to think differently. Because if we don't, the VUCA world is going to swallow us all up. Thank you for your time, and now happy to take any questions.